Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the USS Horizon watching the star map with tired eyes. 3 months of deep space exploration had turned up nothing but empty systems and dead rocks. His crew was getting restless and he couldn't blame them. The vast emptiness of space had a way of wearing down even the most experienced explorers. "Captain, we're picking up something strange on long-range sensors," said communications specialist Amy Foster from her station. Her voice carried that mix of excitement and uncertainty that came with any new discovery this far from home. Jake walked over to her console and looked at the readings. The display showed a faint signal coming from the Kepler 442 system about 6 light-years away. It wasn't natural radiation or stellar activity. This was definitely artificial, and it was repeating in a pattern that suggested intelligence. "What do you think, Amy?" Jake asked as he studied the data scrolling across her screen. "It looks like a distress signal, sir, but I've never seen anything like this pattern before. The frequency modulation is incredibly complex. Whatever is sending this has technology we don't understand," Amy replied while adjusting her instruments to get a clearer reading. Chief Science Officer Lisa Carter joined them at the communications station. Her analytical mind was already working through the possibilities. "The signal strength suggests the source is large, possibly a starship or space station. The complexity indicates an advanced civilization, but the irregular pattern suggests systems failure or damage." Jake nodded and made his decision. "Set course for Kepler 442. We'll investigate this signal and see if someone needs help out there." Navigation Officer Ryan Bell began plotting their course while the rest of the crew prepared for the journey. The Horizon's quantum drive could cover the distance in about 18 hours, but Jake ordered the ship to drop out of hyperspace at the edge of the system for safety. When they arrived at Kepler 442, the crew found something that took their breath away. Floating in the darkness near the 4th planet was a vessel unlike anything in human records. It was enormous, easily 3 times the size of the Horizon, with a design that seemed to flow like liquid metal. The hull appeared to be made of some crystalline material that caught and reflected the system's pale sunlight in beautiful patterns. "My God, it's beautiful," whispered Lisa. As she ran her scanners over the alien ship, the vessel was clearly damaged, with sections of its hull breached, and what looked like internal fires flickering through the transparent sections. Power readings were inconsistent, and the distress signal was growing weaker. "Captain, we're receiving a transmission," Amy announced suddenly. "It's coming from the alien vessel, and it's in perfect English." Jake felt his heart skip a beat. "Put it on speaker, Amy." The bridge filled with a voice that was melodious and strangely calming. "Human vessel, this is Ambassador Cathara of the Vailtor. We have suffered critical damage to our ship, and many of our crew are injured. We request assistance if you are able to provide it." Jake looked around at his crew. They were all staring at the speakers with expressions of wonder and concern. The alien's voice had an almost musical quality that made you want to listen and help. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the USS Horizon. We receive your distress call and we're prepared to offer assistance." "What is your current status?" Jake responded. "Captain Morrison, we are grateful for your response. Our ship's primary systems have failed and we have lost life support in several sections. We have survivors, but they need medical attention. We would be honored to accept your help." Lisa was already studying the alien vessel with her instruments. "Captain, their ship is definitely in bad shape. I'm reading massive power fluctuations and what looks like atmosphere bleeding from multiple hull breaches. If there are survivors aboard, they won't last much longer without help." Jake made another quick decision. "Ambassador Cathara, we're going to dock with your vessel and send over a rescue team. Can you provide us with safe entry points and atmospheric readings for your ship?" "Of course, Captain. We will transmit the necessary data now. Please be aware that some areas of our ship may be hazardous due to the damage we have sustained." As the Horizon moved closer to the alien vessel, Jake organized his rescue teams. He selected his most experienced crew members, including Security Chief Karen Davis and Medical Officer Dr. Helen Burke. They would board the alien ship and assess the situation while the Horizon's engineering team prepared to provide emergency repairs. When the airlock finally opened and Jake got his first look at the aliens, he was struck by their appearance. The Veilter were humanoid, but taller and more elegant than humans, with skin that seemed to shimmer like polished crystal. They wore flowing robes that appeared to be made of the same material as their ship, and their movements were graceful and fluid. Ambassador Cathara greeted them personally. She was striking even by alien standards, with features that seemed almost too perfect. Her voice was even more beautiful in person, and Jake found himself wanting to trust her immediately. Captain Morrison, words cannot express our gratitude for your assistance. The Veilter have traveled far among the stars, but we have rarely encountered such kindness from unknown species, she said with what appeared to be genuine emotion. Jake felt a warmth spread through him at her words. We're glad we could help, Ambassador. Exploration is dangerous work, and we all need to look out for each other out here. Dr. Burke began treating the injured Veilter while Jake's engineering team assessed the damage to their ship. The aliens were cooperative and grateful, accepting human help with what seemed like genuine relief. Their technology was advanced, but not so different from human systems that the rescue teams couldn't understand it. What Jake and his crew didn't know was that, from the moment they had made contact, the Veilter had been trying to influence their minds. Ambassador Cathara and her people were master manipulators who had perfected the art of psychic control over thousands of years. They had expected to quickly dominate the human crew and add another species to their growing empire. But something was wrong. The humans showed normal emotional responses to Veilter presence, but their minds remained completely closed to psychic influence. Cathara had never encountered anything like it. Every other species they had met had fallen under Veilter control within hours of first contact. She maintained her grateful facade, while secretly testing stronger mental influences on the humans. She focused particularly on Captain Morrison, trying to plant suggestions of trust and compliance in his mind. Nothing worked. It was as if the humans had natural shields that blocked all psychic intrusion. The rescue operation continued for several hours, with humans and Veilter working together to repair the damaged systems. Jake found himself genuinely liking the aliens. They were intelligent, cultured, and seemed to share humanity's curiosity about the universe. When Ambassador Cathara suggested that their species should establish formal diplomatic relations, Jake agreed immediately. We would be honored to introduce your people to human civilization, Ambassador. Perhaps some of your crew would like to accompany us back to Earth for cultural exchange. Jake offered. Cathara, as crystalline features showed what appeared to be joy. That would be wonderful, Captain. The Veilter have much to learn from humanity, and perhaps we can share some of our knowledge as well. As the Horizon departed the Kepler 442 system with a small group of Veilter guests aboard, Jake felt satisfied with the successful first contact. He had no idea that he had just invited the galaxy's most dangerous predators into human space, or that their failure to control human minds had set in motion events that would reshape the entire galaxy. 3 weeks after the first contact with the Veilter, the aliens had become regular visitors to human space stations and colonies. Ambassador Cathara had established a temporary embassy on Luna Station, where she met with human diplomats and scientists daily. The media called it the most important moment in human history, and everyone wanted to learn about their new alien friends. Dr. Helen Burke sat in her office at the Xenopsychology Institute, reviewing her notes from the latest sessions with the Veilter visitors. Something about their behavior patterns bothered her, but she couldn't put her finger on exactly what it was. The aliens were friendly, cooperative, and eager to share their knowledge, but their responses to certain questions seemed too perfect, too rehearsed. Dr. Burke, we have the brain scan results from yesterday's session, said her assistant Martin Cole as he entered her office with a tablet full of data. Helen looked at the scans, showing the neural activity of both human and Veilter subjects during their cultural exchange meetings. The human brain patterns were normal, showing the expected responses to new stimuli and social interaction. The Veilter patterns, however, were unlike anything she had ever seen. There were sections of their brains that showed constant high activity even during rest periods. Martin, look at these readings from the Veilter subjects. This area here shows continuous neural firing even when they're supposedly relaxed. It's almost like they're constantly concentrating on something, Helen pointed to the unusual patterns. On her screen, Martin studied the data with interest. Could it be how their species processes information differently than humans? Maybe their brains just work in ways we don't understand yet. Helen nodded but remained troubled. Maybe, but I've studied dozens of alien species and I've never seen anything like this. It's as if they're constantly engaged in some kind of mental activity that we can't detect. Meanwhile, at Earth Defense Command Intelligence Officer Greg Stevens was having his own concerns about the Veilter. His job was to run background checks on all alien visitors to human space, and the results for the Veilter were impossibly clean. Every story matched perfectly, every detail checked out, and there were no inconsistencies anywhere in their records. "Sir, we have a problem," said his analyst Jane Porter, as she entered his office with a stack of reports. Greg looked up from his computer where he had been reviewing Veilter diplomatic files. "What kind of problem, Jane?" "It's about the Veilter background checks, sir. They're too perfect. Every single detail matches exactly, every story is consistent, and there are no contradictions anywhere. In 30 years of intelligence work, I've never seen records this clean. Even our own diplomats have more inconsistencies in their files." Greg felt his instincts tingling. "Run the checks again, Jane. Triple-check everything and look for any gaps or missing information. Nobody's background is this perfect." At the same time, Security Chief Karen Davis was walking through the diplomatic quarter of Luna Station, observing the interactions between different alien species. The station hosted representatives from several civilizations, including the proud Korthik warriors, the scholarly Mistral researchers, and the advanced Zenith engineers. What Karen noticed was strange. Whenever the Veilter were present, the other alien species became unusually quiet and submissive. The normally aggressive Korthak warriors stood at attention like soldiers waiting for orders. The Mistral scholars stopped their constant debates and simply listened. The Zenith engineers abandoned their usual arrogant attitudes and became almost servile. "Lieutenant Ross, come here," Karen called to one of her security officers. "Yes, ma'am," replied Lieutenant Tom Ross as he approached. "Have you noticed anything odd about how the other aliens behave around the Veilter?" Karen asked while watching a group of Korthik warriors standing perfectly still near Ambassador Cathara. Tom looked around the diplomatic area and nodded slowly. "Now that you mention it, ma'am, they do seem different when the Veilter are around. More controlled somehow. I thought maybe it was just respect for a new species, but it does seem excessive." Karen made a mental note to investigate this further. Her security training told her that when behavior patterns changed suddenly, there was usually a reason. Back on the Veilter ship hidden in the outer system, High Manipulator Zetha Onus was growing increasingly frustrated with the situation. The human species had proven completely immune to psychic manipulation, and this was creating serious problems for their carefully planned expansion into this sector of the galaxy. "Report on the human resistance to our influence," Zetha Onus commanded his subordinate strategic coordinator Velanara. "The situation remains unchanged, High Manipulator. No human subject has shown any response to our mental projections. We have tested everything from subtle suggestion to direct psychic assault. Their minds appear to be naturally shielded against our abilities," Velanara reported with obvious frustration. "This is unprecedented. In 5,000 years of expansion, we have never encountered a species that could resist our control. Every other race fell within days of first contact." "How is this possible?" Zetha Onus demanded. Velanara consulted her notes. "Our psychic analysts believe it may be related to their chaotic neural patterns. Human thoughts are unpredictable and emotionally driven. Their minds change direction constantly, making it impossible to establish the psychic anchors we need for control." Zetha Onus considered this information. "Continue the cultural exchange programs, but increase our technological offerings. If we cannot control their minds directly, we must find other ways to influence their society. Begin Phase 2 of the infiltration protocol." The Veilter had been using their standard conquest strategy for millennia. First contact followed by gradual mental domination, then complete control of the target species. Their subjects always believed they were making their own decisions while actually serving Velter interests. The humans were the first species to resist this process. Dr. Burke continued her research into Velter psychology, but her findings were becoming more disturbing. During one session, she decided to test something. She had noticed that the Velter subjects showed stress responses whenever humans asked unexpected questions or changed topics suddenly. Ambassador Cathara, I'd like to try something different today. Instead of our usual structured interview, I want to have a completely random conversation about whatever comes to mind. Helen suggested. For just a moment, Helen saw something flicker in the ambassador's crystalline features. It was subtle but unmistakable. Fear. The expression was gone so quickly that Helen almost missed it, but it was definitely there. Of course, Dr. Burke. We are always eager to learn more about human social customs, Cathara replied, but her voice carried a slight tension that hadn't been there before. The session that followed was revealing. When Helen asked random questions or changed subjects without warning the Velter, Ambassador struggled to maintain her composed demeanor. Her responses became slightly delayed and less polished. Most telling of all, the unusual brain activity that Helen had noticed before became even more intense. Greg Stevens was making progress on his investigation as well. His team had discovered that several of the Velter's claims about their home system couldn't be verified through long-range observations. The stellar data they provided didn't match what human astronomers could see through their telescopes. "Sir, we found something important," Jane reported during their daily briefing. "The Velter claim their homeworld orbits a red giant star in the Vega system, but our observations show no planets there at all. Either they're lying about their origin or they're not from where they claim to be." Greg felt pieces of a puzzle starting to come together. "Keep digging, Jane. I want to know everything about these aliens, including things they don't want us to know." Corinne Davis had been conducting her own investigation into the behavior of other alien species around the Velter. What she discovered was deeply troubling. The other aliens weren't just being respectful, they were showing signs of being completely controlled. She had obtained security footage of alien diplomatic meetings from before the Velter arrival. The contrast was shocking. The Korthic warriors had been fierce and independent. The Mistral scholars had been curious and questioning. The Zenith engineers had been proud and competitive. Now they all acted like obedient servants whenever the Velter were present. "Lieutenant Ross, I need you to run a discrete analysis of alien behavior patterns over the past 3 weeks, Corinne ordered. "What kind of analysis, ma'am?" Tom asked. "I want to know if the other alien species are acting differently since the Velter arrived. Something is very wrong here, and I intend to find out what it is." As the second phase of contact continued, the Velter began offering more advanced technologies to humanity. They shared improvements to shield generators, medical scanners, and communication systems. To human scientists and politicians, it seemed like generous gifts from new friends. To the Velter, it was preparation for a different kind of conquest. If they couldn't control human minds directly, they would have to find other ways to achieve dominance. Technology dependence, economic manipulation, and social infiltration were all possibilities. The Velter had thousands of years of experience in conquering species, and they would not be defeated by one resistant race. But as the weeks passed, more humans began to notice. Communications Officer Tony Martinez was working the night shift on Luna Station when he picked up something that would change everything. The Deep Space Monitoring Array had detected an encrypted transmission coming from the Velter embassy. The signal was incredibly complex and unlike anything in human communication protocols. Tony had been monitoring alien communications for years, and he knew when something was unusual. This transmission was being broadcast on a frequency that the Velter had never mentioned in their technical exchanges with humanity. More importantly, it was being sent toward empty space far beyond the outer planets. "This is strange," Tony muttered to himself as he tried to decode the signal. The encryption was unlike anything he had seen before, but there were patterns hidden in the data that suggested it was definitely artificial intelligence. He decided to contact Lavra Kim, the best codebreaker in the intelligence division. Lavra had broken alien codes before, and if anyone could crack this signal, it would be her. Lavra, I need your help with something urgent, Tony said when she answered his call. What have you found, Tony? Lavra asked, immediately alert despite the late hour. I intercepted a Veiltor transmission that doesn't match any of their known communication protocols. The encryption is incredibly sophisticated, and it's being sent to coordinates in deep space, where we've never detected any alien presence. Lavra was quiet for a moment. Send me everything you have? Tony, if the Veiltor are communicating with someone they haven't told us about, we need to know who and why. While Tony and Lavara worked on the mysterious transmission, Dr. Hellenberg was making her own disturbing discoveries. Her psychological studies of the Veiltor had revealed patterns that suggested they were not being honest about their intentions or their past. The more I study them, the more convinced I become that they're hiding something major from us, Helen told her colleague Dr. Robert Chun during their weekly research meeting. What kind of thing? Helen Robert asked as he reviewed her latest findings. I think they're testing us. Every cultural exchange session feels like an experiment. They ask questions that seem designed to probe our psychological weaknesses, and they watch our responses very carefully. It's not natural curiosity, it's systematic analysis. Robert looked at the brain scan data Helen had collected. These neural patterns are definitely unusual. The constant high activity in their frontal lobes suggests they're engaged in complex mental processes that we can't detect. It's almost like they're trying to do something to us that isn't working. Helen nodded grimly. That's exactly what I think. I believe they have some kind of psychic ability that they're trying to use on humans. The fact that it's not working is making them frustrated, and they're trying different approaches. Meanwhile, Security Chief Karen Davis had been investigating the behavior changes in other alien species. What she discovered was so disturbing that she immediately contacted Intelligence Officer Greg Stevens. Greg, we need to meet privately. I've found something about the other aliens that you need to see, Karen said over a secure communication channel. They met in a shielded conference room where Karen presented her findings. She had video recordings of alien diplomatic meetings from before and after the Veiltor arrival. The differences were shocking. Look at this footage of a Korthik trade negotiation from 2 months ago, Karen showed Greg a recording of fierce alien warriors arguing passionately about resource allocation. Now look at the same Korthik representatives in a meeting with the Veiltor present. The second video showed the same warriors standing silently while Ambassador Cathara spoke. They responded only when directly addressed, and their answers were brief and compliant. It's like they're completely different beings, Greg observed. The Korthik are naturally aggressive and independent. This level of submission is completely against their nature. Karen nodded. I've documented similar changes in all the alien species. The Mistral scholars have stopped asking questions. The Zenith engineers have abandoned their competitive attitudes. Every species becomes passive and obedient when the Veiltor are around. Greg felt a chill run down his spine. Karen, I think we're looking at evidence of mind control. The Veiltor aren't just diplomatic visitors, they're puppet masters controlling other species. Lavra Kim's breakthrough came 3 days later. Working around the clock with Tony Martinez, she had finally cracked the Veiltor encryption. What they found was terrifying. Tony, you need to see this, Lavra said with barely controlled excitement and fear. I've decoded part of the transmission, and it's not what we expected. The decoded message revealed that the Veiltor were not alone. They had been communicating with hidden fleets positioned throughout the galaxy. The transmission contained detailed reports on human psychological profiles and recommendations for alternative control methods. According to this message, the Veiltor have been trying to use something called psychic manipulation on humans, and it's completely failed, Lavra explained. They're requesting instructions from their commanders on how to proceed with what they call the resistant species. Tony stared at the translation in horror. Lavra, this means they've been trying to control our minds from the beginning. The whole cultural exchange program has been a cover for mental domination attempts. The most shocking part of the message was a list of other species that had been successfully controlled by the Veilter. The Korthic Empire, the Mistral Collective, and the Zenith Federation were all listed as subjects under complete psychic domination. "My God, Lavra, they've enslaved entire civilizations," Tony whispered. "Those aliens we thought were independent species are actually controlled by the Veilter. That's why they act so strangely when the Veilter are present." Lavra continued reading the decoded message. "It gets worse, Tony. According to this, the Veilter have been controlling these species for thousands of years. Their subjects believe they're living in free societies, but they're actually serving as resources for Veilter expansion." Captain Jake Morrison was called to an emergency meeting with Earth Defense Command, Admiral Patricia Stone, and Intelligence. Director Paul Chang briefed him on the discoveries made by his crew and the intelligence services. "Captain, what we're about to tell you will sound impossible, but we have solid evidence to support every claim," Admiral Stone began. "The Veilter are not peaceful explorers. They're conquerors who use psychic manipulation to enslave other species." Jake felt his world shifting. "Admiral, that's a serious accusation. Are you certain about this?" Director Chang presented the evidence. "We have intercepted communications proving they've been trying to control human minds since first contact. We have psychological analysis showing they're conducting experiments on our people. We have video evidence of their control over other alien species." Jake reviewed the material with growing horror. "This means every interaction we've had with them has been a lie. They've been trying to turn us into slaves." "That's correct, Captain," Admiral Stone confirmed. "The only reason they haven't succeeded is that humans appear to be naturally immune to their psychic influence. This makes us uniquely dangerous to their empire." Director Chang leaned forward. "Jake, we need you to continue acting normally around the Veilter while we gather more intelligence. If they realize we know the truth, they might abandon their subtle approach and resort to open warfare." Jake nodded, though his mind was reeling. "What about the other species, Admiral? If they're really under Veilter control, shouldn't we try to help them?" "That's exactly what we're going to do, Captain," Admiral Stone replied. "But first we need to understand the full scope of their empire and find a way to break their psychic control." As the meeting ended, Jake realized that humanity had stumbled into something far bigger than a simple first contact scenario. They had discovered a galactic conspiracy that had been hidden for millennia. The Veilter's failure to control human minds had exposed an empire built on mental slavery. The question now was what humanity would do with this knowledge. The Veilter had controlled dozens of species across thousands of years. Their empire spanned multiple star systems and commanded resources beyond imagination. Humanity was a single species with limited military power facing an enemy that had conquered most of the known galaxy, but humans had something the Veilter had never encountered before. They had minds that could not be controlled and the determination to fight for freedom. The galaxy was about to learn that sometimes the greatest weapon against tyranny was simply the refusal to submit. Ambassador Cathara continued her diplomatic meetings, unaware that her species' greatest secret had been discovered. She still believed that humans would eventually fall under Veilter influence like every other species before them. She had no idea that her failure to control human minds had set in motion events that would bring down an empire that had stood for thousands of years. The war for galactic freedom was about to begin, and humanity would be fighting, not just for their own survival, but for the liberation of every enslaved species in the galaxy. The first sign of the hidden war came when the Korthic Empire suddenly declared hostilities against human colonies without warning. Admiral Janet Hill was reviewing routine patrol reports when the emergency alert came through from the frontier worlds. "Admiral, we're receiving distress calls from New Manchester Colony," reported Communications Officer Lisa Grant with urgency in her voice. "They say a Korthic fleet just attacked without provocation and demanded immediate surrender." Janet felt her blood run cold. The Korthak had been trading partners with humanity for over a year. There had been no disputes, no conflicts, and no signs of growing tension between the species. Are you certain about this, Lisa? Janet asked while bringing up the tactical display. The Korthak have never shown aggression toward human settlements before. Yes, ma'am, the colonists are reporting at least 12 Korthak warships in orbit demanding complete evacuation within 6 hours. The Korthak commander claims humans have violated ancient territorial agreements that we've never heard of. General Kevin Ross was dealing with similar problems on multiple fronts. The Mistral Collective had begun economic warfare against human trade routes, while the Zenith Federation launched coordinated cyber attacks on human infrastructure. To the outside observer, it appeared that humanity had somehow provoked 3 major galactic civilizations simultaneously. General, this doesn't make sense, said Colonel Frank Peterson during their emergency strategy meeting. These species have been our allies for months. Why would they all turn against us at the same time? Kevin studied the tactical reports flowing in from across human space. Frank, I think this is connected to what intelligence discovered about the Veilter. If those aliens really can control minds, then maybe they're using their enslaved species against us. The attacks were carefully coordinated to avoid massive casualties while creating maximum disruption to human society. Korthak forces targeted military installations but avoided civilian areas. Mistral economic pressure focused on luxury goods rather than essential supplies. Zenith cyber attacks disrupted communications but didn't damage life support systems. Commander Nick Taylor was leading a special operations team tasked with investigating the sudden hostility from their former allies. His mission was to capture a Korthak commander and determine why their behavior had changed so dramatically. Team Alpha, we're approaching the Korthak command ship, Nick reported over the secure channel. Remember, we need prisoners, not casualties. Something is controlling these aliens and we need to find out what. The boarding action was unlike anything Nick had experienced. The Korthak warriors fought with mechanical precision, but without their usual fierce passion. They followed orders perfectly, but showed no initiative or creativity in their tactics. So something's wrong with these Korthak, reported Sergeant Bill Hayes after they had secured the command deck. They're fighting like robots, not like the proud warriors we've encountered before. Nick interrogated the captured Korthak commander and discovered something disturbing. The alien warrior spoke in the same mechanical tone, and his responses seemed programmed rather than natural. Why did your empire attack human colonies? Nick demanded. Humans violated ancient territorial boundaries and must be removed from sacred Korthak space, the commander replied without emotion. What territorial boundaries? We've had trade agreements with your people for over a year, Nick pressed the Korthak. Commander paused as if accessing information. Trade agreements are irrelevant. The Veilter have explained the true nature of human expansion. Compliance with Veilter guidance is required for galactic stability. Nick felt pieces clicking into place. Tell me about the Veilter commander. When did they first make contact with your empire? The wise Veilter have guided Korthak development for many generations. Their counsel has brought prosperity and peace to our worlds, the commander answered in the same flat tone. Agent Beth Clark was conducting similar investigations with captured Mistral and Zenith personnel. Her findings confirmed Nick's suspicions. All 3 species showed signs of long-term mental conditioning and complete psychological dependence on Veilter guidance. Director Chang, we have confirmation that the attacking species are under some form of mind control, Beth reported during her briefing with intelligence. The prisoners all speak about the Veilter in the same reverential terms, and they can't explain their sudden hostility toward humans without referencing Veilter instructions. Meanwhile, Dr. Helen Burke was working with a team of neuroscientists to understand how the Veilter psychic abilities worked. Her research had taken on new urgency now that humanity was at war with multiple alien civilizations. The key breakthrough came when we studied human proximity effects on controlled aliens, Helen explained to the Emergency Science Council. When humans are present, Veilter subjects show increased confusion and disorientation. It's as if our natural resistance to psychic influence creates interference with their mental conditioning. Dr. Matt Turner nodded as he reviewed Helen's data. This suggests that human presence might actually disrupt the psychic connections that control other species. If we could amplify this effect, we might be able to break their mental chains. The war itself was strange and frustrating for human military commanders. Their enemies fought with perfect coordination but seemed to lack the spark of independent thought that made warfare unpredictable. Korthak tactics were flawless but inflexible. Mistral strategies were comprehensive but couldn't adapt to changing circumstances. Zenith technology was advanced but couldn't innovate beyond programmed parameters. Agent Danny Cooper was coordinating resistance efforts behind enemy lines when he discovered something remarkable. Human refugees hiding on Korthak-controlled worlds reported that some alien soldiers seemed confused and disoriented when humans were nearby for extended periods. This is Cooper reporting from Korthak Sector 7, Danny transmitted over encrypted channels. I'm observing unusual behavior among enemy forces in areas with high human populations. Some Korthak warriors are beginning to question their orders. Agent Marie Johnson confirmed similar reports from Mistral space. We're seeing breakdowns in the conditioning when Veilter subjects are exposed to human presence for more than 48 hours. It's like we're natural jamming devices for their psychic control. The Veilter leadership was growing desperate as their carefully controlled empire began showing cracks. High manipulator Zethaonis had never faced a situation where their psychic network was being disrupted by proximity to a resistant species. The human interference is spreading to our controlled populations, Strategic Coordinator Velinara reported, with barely concealed panic. Korthak commanders in human-occupied systems are beginning to show signs of independent thought. Some Mistral researchers are questioning their loyalty to our guidance. Zethaonis studied the reports from across the galaxy. Wherever humans were present in significant numbers, the mental conditioning of enslaved species began to weaken. It was as if humanity carried some kind of psychic virus that infected other species with the desire for freedom. Initiate the final protocol, Zethaonis ordered. If we cannot control the humans and they continue to disrupt our empire, then they must be eliminated completely. Contact all fleet commanders and prepare for total war. The hidden conflict was about to become open warfare. The Veilter had spent thousands of years building their empire through subtle manipulation and psychological control. Now they faced a species that was immune to their primary weapon and whose mere presence could liberate their slaves. Commander Sarah Walsh was analyzing battlefield reports when she noticed a pattern in the enemy's behavior. General Ross, I think I understand what's happening. The Veilter aren't trying to conquer us in the traditional sense. They're trying to eliminate us because we're a threat to their entire system of control. General Ross reviewed her analysis. You think they see us as a disease that could spread to their enslaved populations? Exactly, sir. Every human colony that gets overrun reports the same thing. The occupying forces seem confused and some even defect to join human resistance groups. We're not just immune to their mind control, we're actually contagious with free. Well, the realization changed everything about human strategy. They weren't just fighting for their own survival, they were fighting to liberate an entire galaxy of enslaved species. Every battle became an opportunity to expose more aliens to human influence and break the psychic chains that had bound them for millennia. Pete Barnes was coordinating refugee operations when he witnessed something that gave him hope. A group of Korthak soldiers assigned to guard human prisoners had begun talking among themselves in ways that suggested independent thought. The humans fight for concepts we had forgotten, one Korthak warrior said to another. They speak of freedom and choice as if these things have meaning. The Veilter have always told us that such concepts lead to chaos and suffering, replied his companion, but there was uncertainty in his voice. Perhaps the Veilter do not know everything, the first warrior suggested quietly. Pete realized he was witnessing the beginning of an awakening. The Veilter-esque greatest nightmare was coming true. Their enslaved species were beginning to remember what it meant to be free, and they were learning it from the humans, who refused to be controlled. The final battle began when human intelligence located the Nexus of Thought, a massive space station hidden in the void between galaxies. Dr. Helen Burke's research team had discovered that this structure was the central hub of the Vailter psychic network from which they coordinated their control over dozens of enslaved species. Admiral Patricia Stone stood on the bridge of the flagship USS Liberty as the human fleet prepared for the most important mission in galactic history. The Armada included every available warship from Earth Defense Command along with volunteer vessels from colonies across human space. "Admiral, we're detecting massive energy signatures from the Nexus," reported Captain Alex Green from the sensor. Station. The station is enormous, at least 50 kilometers in diameter, and it's generating some kind of psychic field that extends across multiple star systems. Patricia studied the tactical display showing the alien fortress around the Nexus. Hundreds of ships from enslaved species formed defensive perimeters. Korthek battle cruisers, Mistral research vessels, and Zenith destroyers all waited to defend their masters even though they didn't understand why. Captain Green signaled the fleet to assume attack formation. "But remember, our primary objective isn't to destroy the enemy ships. Our goal is to reach the Nexus core and shut down their psychic network," Patricia ordered. Dr. Helen Burke was aboard the Liberty with a special device her team had developed based on their research into human psychic resistance. The amplifier could project humanity's natural immunity to mind control across a much wider area, potentially breaking Vailter influence over their enslaved populations. "Admiral, the psychic amplifier is ready for deployment," Helen reported from the science section. "When we get close enough to the Nexus, I can create a null field that should sever their control over every species in the area." Dr. Matt Turner and Dr. Kathy Lewis worked alongside Helen to monitor the device. Their calculations showed that a successful deployment could free millions of enslaved beings across multiple star systems, but the amplifier had to be positioned at the exact center of the Vailter network. The battle that followed was unlike anything in recorded history. As human ships advanced toward the Nexus, the enslaved defenders attacked with mechanical precision but no real passion. Korthek warriors fought bravely, but without the fire that had once made them legendary. Mistral strategists coordinated perfectly but couldn't adapt when their plans failed. Captain Jake Morrison commanded a strike force tasked with breaching the Nexus defenses. His ship, the USS Horizon, carried a team of specialists including Commander Nick Taylor and Agent Beth Clark, who would assault the station's core while the fleet provided cover. "Jake, we're seeing something incredible out here," reported his communications officer, Amy Foster. "Some of the enemy ships are breaking formation. It looks like their crews are becoming confused about their orders." Jake watched as a Korthek battle cruiser suddenly stopped firing and began broadcasting on open channels. The alien commander's voice carried confusion and growing anger as he realized what had been done to his people. "This is Commander Thrakel of the Korthek fleet. What madness is this? Why do we fight against beings who have never harmed us? Where are our true thoughts, and why do we serve these crystal creatures who hide behind our strength?" Similar awakenings were happening throughout the enslaved fleets. The closer human ships got to the Nexus, the more disrupted the psychic control became. Mistral researchers began questioning their loyalty, while Zenith engineers wondered why they were attacking potential allies inside the Nexus. High Manipulator Zetha Onus watched his empire crumbling as human proximity interfered with thousands of years of careful mental conditioning. The psychic network that had controlled dozens of species was failing as free will spread like a virus through his enslaved populations. Strategic Coordinator Velinara, activate the emergency protocols, Zetha Onus commanded desperately. Increase psychic output to maximum levels and eliminate the human contamination before it spreads further. Velinara worked frantically at the control systems, but the damage was already spreading beyond their ability to contain. High Manipulator, the network is failing across multiple sectors. Our controlled populations are experiencing mass awakening events. Many are already turning against our forces. The assault on the Nexus core was led by Jake Morrison's team, supported by liberated alien forces who had joined the human cause. Former Korthak slaves fought alongside human marines while Mistral scientists provided intelligence about Veilter technology. "Captain Morrison, this is incredible," said Dr. Helen Burke as they fought through the station corridors. "The psychic interference from human presence is cascading through their entire network. Every step we take forward frees more enslaved minds." The Nexus interior was a maze of crystalline passages and chambers filled with psychic amplification equipment. At the center lay the main control room, where Zethonis and his remaining loyal followers made their final stand. "Humans, you do not understand what you are destroying," Zethonis projected directly into their minds as they breached his sanctum. "We brought order to chaos and purpose to meaningless existence. Without our guidance, these species will return to primitive warfare and suffering." Jake Morrison looked at the alien leader with disgust. "You brought slavery disguised as peace and control disguised as guidance? The species you enslaved had their own cultures, their own dreams, and their own right to choose their destiny." The final confrontation was brief but decisive. When Helen Burke activated the psychic amplifier at the network's core, the feedback destroyed thousands of years of mental conditioning in an instant. Across the galaxy, enslaved populations suddenly remembered who they truly were and what had been stolen from them. The Veilter psychic network collapsed completely, sending shockwaves through every controlled world. On Korthak homeworlds, warriors remembered their proud traditions of honor and independence. In Mistral Academy, scholars recalled their love of knowledge and questioning. Throughout Zenith, space engineers rediscovered their competitive nature and innovative spirit. Without their primary weapon of psychic control, the Veilter were revealed as a relatively small population that had built their empire entirely through mental manipulation. Their fleets surrendered quickly when faced with the combined forces of all the species they had enslaved. In the aftermath of the liberation, humanity found itself in an unexpected position of leadership. The freed species looked to humans as the ones who had broken their chains and shown them the path back to freedom. Commander Sarah Walsh worked with former slaves to establish the Galactic Liberation Council, a new governing body designed to prevent any species from achieving the kind of dominance the Veilter had maintained. Pete Barnes coordinated humanitarian aid to worlds struggling to rebuild their true cultures after millennia of suppression. The healing process was long and difficult. Many of the liberated species had forgotten their original languages, customs, and beliefs after generations of Veilter control. Human anthropologists and historians worked alongside alien scholars to help recover lost cultural knowledge. Former Korthak General Thrakel spoke for many when he addressed the new council. "The humans gave us back something we had forgotten, we had lost. They showed us that minds meant to be free cannot be permanently chained. For this gift we will be forever grateful." Mistral philosopher Andira expressed similar sentiments. "In our libraries we found records of questions we once asked and thoughts we once explored. The humans reminded us that the pursuit of knowledge requires the freedom to doubt and the courage to challenge what we are told." Dr. Helen Burke's final research report revealed the scientific explanation for humanity's unique resistance to psychic manipulation. Human consciousness was too chaotic and emotionally driven for the Veilter to establish the mental anchors needed for control. The very traits that made humans seem primitive compared to other species had actually been their greatest evolutionary advantage. Our stubborn independence and emotional unpredictability made us immune to mental domination, Helen concluded in her report. The Veilter succeeded with other species because they were more logical and ordered in their thinking. Humans were too messy and contradictory to be controlled. As the galaxy began to heal, humanity took on the role of protectors of mental freedom. Their natural resistance to psychic influence made them ideal peacekeepers in a universe where the threat of mind control could never be completely eliminated. The story of humanity's accidental liberation of the galaxy became legend among the freed species. They had not intended to become heroes or liberators. They had simply been immune to control, and their presence had spread that immunity like a gift to everyone around them. In the end, humanity's greatest contribution to galactic civilization was not technology or military might but the simple demonstration that free will was possible and worth fighting for. They had shown an entire galaxy that minds meant to be free could never be permanently enslaved.